Hi, I'm your host, Martin Slade Jr. Welcome to another edition of Beyond the Beyond. I'm also the founder of the New World Generation, Unity One Worldwide. Well, today's topic is the astral plane. What is it made of? What are some of the principles and some of the things that are designated to this particular realm? Let's explain first that we are made up of various elements. Some physical, some we were ascribed to as being metaphysical. The physical we know is obvious, that's the body. The metaphysical or the psychic or the spiritual part, which we sometimes pay little or no attention to, is our astral body. There's also a casual body, but we'll talk about that in another episode. We're going to deal primarily with the astral plane and our astral body. And the reason I'm talking about this topic is because it plays a very integral role in our development, both physically and spiritually, mentally, and above all, morally. The astral plane is a realm of existence that is like another corridor, another place where we reside in our spiritual capacities, and which we seldom pay any attention to. The astral form that I'm going to be speaking about is an exact duplicate of what our physical form looks like. The astral world is just another world just beyond the door. And it is made up of exactly the very same images, the same dimensions, the same everything you see on the physical realm. The only thing is, it's made of very fine, minute matter. In other words, we cannot perceive it because our vision will not allow us to look in that particular spectrum of light. If in fact we were, you would see all your relatives and all your departed ones. You would see other worlds, other beings, both angels, extraterrestrials, nature spirits, ghosts, and all the other host of disembodied types of life forms. On the astral plane, it is made more or less of our spiritual energy than our physical composition. On the astral plane, you cannot touch the surface of anything. If you were to touch something, your hand or body would go through it. It doesn't necessitate you to have to eat. It doesn't necessitate that you have to sleep. There is no pain. And obviously we know at this juncture there's no such thing as death, another part of the illusion. The other thing I think is something to know is that the sun on the astral plane, it's all over, it's everywhere. Even when an astral cloud goes past the sun, it doesn't block out the sun. Light and illumination is everywhere on the astral plane. And its luminosity is magnificent. The items that you see on the physical plane here, such as this table, which you can't see, but a table or my background, is a part of the physical construct. The astral plane is a duplicate of that, but in a more rarefied form. I hope I'm not getting too complicated here. It is a realm that we go to after so-called quote-unquote death. It is where we reunite with our lost ones and our relatives, and believe it or not, even our pets and our animals. In that existence, there is no time. And if it were to be looked upon as a time element, everything happens all at once. There's no past, there's no present, there's only present, there's no past, and there's really no future. Although we can perceive all these in a very synchronistic way. We can see the past, the present, and the future, but on the astral plane, everything happens in the present, simultaneously, all at once. It may be kind of hard to wrap your head around, but these are some of the characteristics and principles of the astral plane. It should also be known that when we pass from our physical bodies to the astral plane, it is a time to rejoice. We take off this heavy, heavy body, we take off these worrying about the rent, and we don't have to worry about loved ones and all these other things. I mean, there's so many things on the physical plane that makes us, just about drives us insane. All these things are left behind, and we are in a carefree existence. And the astral plane is something that we should be looking forward to. You know what's really important about the astral plane You know, it's funny, when we're going somewhere and we're traveling to a remote place or a place we're not familiar with, we get directions. You know, we call up the travel agency, we book our flights, etc. We do all things that would be prerequisite to get to where we're trying to go. Well, it's the same way when we leave these bodies. Quite often people don't know what happens after they leave their bodies. Some would just assume that they just lay in the ground and they decompose and turn into worms and bugs, and well, that's the end of that. You know, you always hear people say, well, you only got one life, so you better live it the best way you can. Reincarnation is something that I wanted to talk about. It's a juncture between this life, the past life, and the life that is to come. Life is not extinguished when we leave these bodies. Life is eternal. We are immortal. We are immortal souls. I think I've extrapolated about this on numerous occasions, that there is no end to life. Life is effervescent, it is continuous, and it is a very beautiful thing. So when we leave our bodies and we assume our other bodies, which is our light form body, we are astral entities and astral beings. And we enjoy some of the pleasures. On the astral plane, were we to meet another astral entity, we couldn't touch them, but we could pass through just about anything that you see on the astral plane. Our bodies could pass through, and we don't have to walk. With tireless effort, we can catapult ourselves and be in any place at any particular time in a microsecond. Like I said, there's no hunger, so that's a good thing. I enjoy eating, but that's something you won't have to do. There is no, as I said, pain or suffering, which is another good thing. A lot of things are misunderstood about reincarnation. I'm just going to touch on that really briefly because it eludes a lot of people, and you know, there are some biblical scholars and some spiritual organizations who would say that this is not true, it's a fallacy. But reincarnation, and it has been thus experimented with and challenged by ancient civilizations, and you know, if you read certain books, you know, from particularly the Far East and even the Native American Indians will tell you about life after death principles, just like the Aborigines talk about dream time. You know, and these are all alluding to life after death and the astral plane. When you go to sleep at night, you know, you dream. I want you to understand that dreaming is just the mind configuring things and constructing things that are of importance to you relative to the things that you do on your daily basis. When you're on the astral plane, there is a different consciousness. Most often when people go on the astral plane at night, and that's a large percentage of people when they go to sleep, they don't remember anything that has occurred or happened, just a bunch of mumbo jumbo ideas and thoughts, which, like I said, comes from the brain trying to construct something that makes sense. But the astral plane, when you go there and something really happens, like you speak to another being, or maybe have an encounter with an extraterrestrial or an angel, or maybe just a long-lived relative, someone you haven't seen in maybe eons, or any number of things can happen on the astral plane. It's subject to happen without you being totally aware that it's going to happen. And what you have to do, and what you should do when you're on the astral plane, is to try to be conscientious of what is going on at the time that you're on this plane. You know, when you go to bed at night, don't go to bed with negative thoughts or worries or fear or any kind of thing like that. That'll take you in a totally different direction. Go to bed with your spirits being uplifted, having lived a good day that day, and make preparation for a better day the next day. If you go to bed with very uplifting feelings, the chances are that when you go to the astral plane, you'll arrive at a much higher level of consciousness. Whether you are aware or not aware of it, you will be in a better place than if you were thinking about something, you know, dire or terrible before you go to bed. And you'll feel a lot better when you wake up too. There are other things too. There's a group in the Bible, they're called the Watchers, and some people ascribe them as being angels and others extraterrestrial. There are a host of entities on the astral plane. You'll see menahunis, as they say some places, leprechauns, and you'll see nature spirits, gnomes, and other beings that have their own existence on the astral plane. And also, there are animals on the astral plane as well. I don't know if animals reincarnate, but I know that they're on you'll see some of your pets and your animals. And the first thing is once you get to the front door, so to speak, that light that you always hear people talk about, there's a light that emanates when you pass on and you walk towards it and you go through it. You'll see a host of relatives and friends, and you'll be very calm and very peaceful. Go towards that light. That is the light that will take you to the other side. We've discussed the astral plane and the different principles and concepts and variety of phenomenon that takes place. Let's change the subject a little bit. Let's talk about something that you might be familiar with. I'm sure everyone's heard of the Bermuda Triangle, and that in itself is on the astral plane as well. There is a wormhole, there are portholes, there are stargates, and very many other parallel universes. When we look out upon space and the whirling planets and the vast galaxies, we somehow are unaware of the cosmic play that time, the illusion of distance, distorts our reality and sometimes confuses us as to where we are as sentient beings in this universe. In other words, is this it? Is this all there is? Dwelling behind the illusionary curtain, there are portholes, stargates, wormholes, and other realms, as of yet not discovered or explored. We spoke previously about the astral world. There are also astral worlds just behind our sense perception. A classic example of other dimensions is the Bermuda Triangle in the Atlantic Ocean and the Dragon's Triangle in Asia and the Pacific Ocean. Many ships, planes, and people suddenly disappear at both locations. Stargates are also another kind of dimension, a gateway or transfer point from one dimension to another destination. It has been purported that aliens use stargates and wormholes to traverse the wide expanse to reach our planet and many others. A large contingency of extraterrestrials are trans-dimensionals. Many aliens and civilizations existed before the creation of man, and aliens occasionally go home to their home planets or are doomed to live in this our Earth. In essence, any real death that we perceive does not exist. Because of the lack of any real information given to the public, we are left with only old and arcane notions of where our soul or spirit goes after we leave our prison called this body. Our spirit and soul exist simultaneously at different levels of space and time. As light beings, we should ultimately be looking forward to the bliss that heaven has promised us, life eternal. Well, now that we've talked about the astral plane and the Bermuda Triangle and stargates and wormholes and parallel universes unknown to ourselves, let's talk about some of the other things that occur in other dimensions and on the astral plane. Well, let's talk about astral entities. There are a host of entities on the astral plane. And let's first start with something that you've heard probably in your church or your parents have told you about, and they're called angels. Some of them are referred to as the watchers, some are referred to as helpers, but they live on the fifth and sixth level. And often, or very seldom, do they interact with human beings. And when they do, they're proclaimed as miracles. There are other entities on the astral plane. They're called our spirit guides. These are spiritual beings who have the title of master, or as an adept, or even as a guru. And these are the beings that help us to traverse through this very difficult life that we have to get to where we need to go. They're also our ancestors. Yeah, there are quite a few cultures that worship ancestors, and they have to be somewhere because they're not here, and they're located on a different level, mostly on the fourth level of the astral plane. A lot of the phenomenon that we come in contact as mortal beings has to deal with the lower planes, either the lower fourth or the upper third dimension. The higher you go in dimensional shift, the more spiritualized, the more illuminated, the more holy those beings or entities are. When we talk about portholes and stargates, that is the way some extraterrestrials come back and forth. There are several places in the Mayan civilization and the Aztec civilization where those stargates still exist. I don't know if they're active or not, but they still exist. Some people purport that the pyramids are a stargate, and they connect us with the planet Sirius. We hear a lot of things about astral entities and also wormholes, and we hear things that seem not to be relevant to our time and place in this century. But this century, the 21st, is unparalleled. This is a great opportunity for us, we as sentient life and beings, to ascend to the higher realms. This is not the end of the world, and it may be the end of times for some of us. But you know, sometimes you have to put away old things in order to create new things. And hence, we have a tendency to look at the destructive nature of things rather than the renewal of things. Life constantly changes. Change is inevitable, but we must perceive change not always as destructive or negative, but look at it in a more refined and pure light, that this is an ascension. Now, I have an organization called the New World Generation, Unity One Worldwide. And my topic basically is light ascension. We have to be more positive when we think about our future. I know there are lots of people out there who have an apocalyptic view of where we are today, and I understand it. I see the distress, I see the maladies, I see the problems, and you know, the climate changes and all the things that have been prophesized in various books, Bibles, etc., etc. But you know, the end game is ascension. The end game is light. The end game is evolution. You know, there's one thing that can be guaranteed, and that is change. Let us not be afraid of change. Let us accommodate ourselves to change. Change is good in most cases. Let's be more affirmative in our actions. Let's be more scholarly. Let's pursue true knowledge as opposed to the knowledge handed down to us from thousands and thousands of years. Let us take a new, fresh approach to life, because there is a new world coming. Some ascribe it to the coming or the second coming of Christ. Some people say it's the coming of Buddha. Some say it's the Mahdi. There are many names for these illuminated beings who we are anticipating to come back. But let's not digress, but let's think in terms of the fact that we are rising, that we are going to meet them somewhere in this universe, in this dimension or other dimensions. Prepare yourselves. I don't expect to be fanatical, but sometimes look up in the sky. Sometimes, as they say, stop and smell the roses. Look at things that you would consider conventional. Go by a lake and see what really is in that lake, what's moving around. Observe life more fully. I know there's so many distractions in the world, and I always say we got to pay the bills and we got to, take care of our families, and we have headaches and pains and sickness, et cetera, et cetera. It's part of this somewhat hellish world that we live in. But there's a lot of beauty to be explored, and a lot of it is ignored because we're distracted by all these strange things. And the things that are really important to us, the things that are really real, we call those peculiar or anomalies. This is our real life, our real world. We were put here for a purpose, and that purpose we must serve. And if we don't, well, let me tell you something called karma. And I'm sure you've heard it numerous occasions. Karma simply means you reap what you sow. So if you're going to plant a seed, plant a healthy seed. And the seeds that I'm talking about are seeds of thought. You are what you think, no more, no less. So if you're thinking negative, and you're getting drawn into the chaos that you see in the world and on television, and you see the stuff that your neighbors are going through, and you get drawn into that, don't expect anything positive to happen. Elevate your consciousness, elevate your mind. Put yourself in a place of light, illumination, a place of peace. Find yourself some place, some location where you can sit down and calm that vicious mind, pray, meditate, or just calm your body and your nerves. Drugs are not going to help. They stimulate you, but they're not going to take you to the place you really want to go. Coffee and all these other things, and those things are not going to take you where you really need to go. What you need to do is sit down and relax and call on that very quiet, very beautiful inner voice.
Most often, people in the Western world have no concept truly about life after death principles or the astral plane. Contemporary societies limit their ideas and beliefs about the afterlife after death based on biblical narratives passed down throughout the centuries. The astral plane is the next step we take before going to the heaven world. When we go to sleep every night, our astral body leaves our physical body and soars from this, our third dimension, to that of the fourth dimension. Our astral body looks like our physical body, only years younger. Despite the fact that a separation of the two bodies take place, we are still connected by a long astral cord, connecting both bodies at the navel. When the cord breaks, we call this death. In ancient days, many cultures believed in life after death and viewed life as eternal. They took extravagant and complicated steps to preserve their physical bodies in hopes of returning back to their same bodies. We today see the results of this great effort when we see the mummies of Egypt, Mayan, and Aztec civilizations. Other cultures believed in reincarnation, meaning that we live over and over hundreds, if not thousands of lives, and in some cases, millions, until we get it right. The fourth dimension is one of the many parallel worlds. It's vibrant, colorful, and full of activity. Light shines in all directions, everything is bright and shimmering. It is truly a fairy-like atmosphere in the upper regions. Many people have had near-death experiences, and they have spoken of a long tunnel filled with light, and greeted on the other side of this tunnel of light by friends, relatives, and in some rare cases, even their own pets. Most people who are not ready for the heaven world sleep deeply, not remembering anything, while the more evolved souls head for the heaven world. Angels, extraterrestrials, nature spirits, and our spiritual guides dwell in the upper regions of the fourth dimension of the astral world, while dark entities, suicides, and demons are found in the much lower regions. Life never ceases to exist. We are immortal, eternal light beings, never to see death, beyond the beyond.
Thank you for watching another episode of Beyond the Beyond. You can follow us on YouTube at ET Contact Martin Slade Jr. Or you can Google search us at thenewworldgeneration.blogspot.com. I hope you enjoyed this show. There'll be many others. Follow us on these various sites that we have on our Google and on our YouTube. This, by the way, is ET Contact number 5. Thank you and have a good life.